You have a kirtan friend, right?
Yes.
Couldn't come.
No.
Out of town?
Yeah, she lives in Massachusetts.
That's out of town for sure. Well, I want to speak from Bhagavad Gita, and I thought, because this evening I've been assigned to speak on a verse in chapter 18, so I'd like to read some verses prior to 26 Second Avenue, chapter 18, text 9. So we pass out Bhagavad Gitas, and we can chant the verse together, or you just have your handheld device that knows everything BBT knows. Chapter 18, we'll start with text 5. We'll see how far we go. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 We'll read text number 5 together. Kirtan's over. Yagyadana tapakarma
Yagyadana tapakarma
Nachajam karyam eva tat
Natyajam karyam
Yagyodanam tapaschaiva
Yagyodanam tapaschaiva
Pavanani manishana Yagyadana tapakarma Natyajam karyam eva tat Yagyodanam tapaschaiva Pavanani manishana Wait to chant.
Yajnadana tapakarma
Yagyadana tapakarma
Natyajam karyameva tat
Natyajam karyam eva tat
Yajnyodanam tapaschaiva
Yagyodanam tapaschaiva
Pavanani manishinam
Yagyadana tapah karma
Yagyadana tapakarma
Natyajyam karyam eva tat
Natyajam karyam eva tat
Yagyodhanam tapaschaiva
Yagyadana tapaschaiva
Pavanani manisinam
Yagyadana tapakarma
Yagyadana tapakarma
Natyajam karyameva tat
Natyajam karyameva tat
Yagyodanam tapaschaiva
Yagyadana tapaschaiva
Pavanani manishinam
Ladies in the back.
Yagyadana
Yagyadana tapakarma
Yajnadana tapakarma
Natyajam karyameva tat
Natyajam karyameva tat
Yagyodanam tapaschaiva
Yagyadana tapaschaiva
Pavanani manishinam
Go ahead.
Yagyadana tapakarma
Yajnadana tapakarma
Natyajam karyameva tat
Natyajam karyameva tat
Yagyodanam tapaschaiva
Yagyodanam tapaschaiva
Pavanani manishinam
Pavanani manishinam
Yagyadana tapah karma
Yagyadana tapah karma
Natyajyam karyameva tad
Natyajyam karyameva tad
Yagyodanam tapaschaiva
Yagyodanam tapaschaiva
Pavanani manishinam
Pavanani manishinam
Yagya
Yagya
of sacrifice.
of sacrifice
Dana,
Dana
charity.
Charity
Tapaha,
Tapaha
and penance.
and penance
Karma,
Karma
activity.
Activity
Na,
Na
never.
Never
Tyajam,
Tyajyam
to be given up.
to be given up
Karyam,
Karyam
must be done.
must be done
Eva,
Eva
certainly.
Certainly
Tat,
Tat
that.
That
Yagya,
Yagya
sacrifice.
Sacrifice
Danam,
Danam
charity.
Charity
Tapaha,
Tapaha
penance.
Penance
Cha,
Cha
also.
Also
Eva,
Eva
certainly.
Certainly
Pavanani,
Pavanani
purifying.
Purifying
Manishinam,
Manishinam
even for the great souls.
Even for the great souls.
Translation: acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance are not to be given up, they must be performed. Indeed, sacrifice, charity, and penance purify even the great souls. Purport: the yogis should perform acts for the advancement of human society. There are many purificatory processes for advancing a human being to spiritual life. The marriage ceremony, for example, is considered to be one of these sacrifices. It is called Vivaha Yagya. Should a sannyasi who is in the renounced order of life and who has given up family relations encourage the marriage ceremony? The Lord here says that any sacrifice which is meant for human welfare should not be given up. Vivaha Yagya, the marriage ceremony, is meant to regulate the human mind so that it may become peaceful for spiritual advancement. For most men, this Vivaha Yagya should be encouraged even by persons in the renounced order of life. Sannyasis should never associate with women, but that does not mean that one who is in the lower stages of life, the young man, should not accept a wife in the marriage ceremony. All prescribed activities are meant for achieving the Supreme Lord. Therefore, in the lower stages, they should not be given up. Similarly, charity is for the purification of the heart. If charity is given to suitable persons, as described previously, it leads one to advanced spiritual life. So there's a series of verses. We'll go ahead a little bit, but first, a little background. It is said about chapter 18, similar to chapter 2. Chapter 2 is contents of Gita summarized, and chapter 18 is concepts of Gita summarized. It's restating topics already spoken about in a summary fashion. So the chapter begins with discussion about activity or karma. That's chapter 2, and chapter 3, and chapter 5. Earlier chapters to help Arjuna or help the reader of Bhagavad Gita understand about activity. Because we all have activity. So how to properly address ourselves to activity is the topic, and Krishna revisits the already discussed topic. And he says, some people say this, and some people say that, and some people say the other thing. Now I'm going to summarize and describe activity. And then right away he speaks about renunciation, meaning similar to chapter 3. You cannot renounce activity. There's an idea, karma sannyas, renounce activity. But you can't renounce activity because the soul is active. And souls that are embodied have activity. And the body is impelled by the modes of nature. And so the modes of nature impel one to act. That's discussed later in Bhagavad also. Modes of nature impel one to act. And karma impels one to act. Karma is described in Bhagavad Gita as that which develops a material body, and once the body is there, the karma, not just you get a body, but it's the impelling influence, the pushing influence of previous activity with a tendency to do something. Like clapping. Even when the kirtan's over, she's clapping. So, tendency to do something, impelled by guna and karma. Our psychophysical nature impels us to do something in a certain way. And even we may try to not do that something, we'll do that something. That's one of the arguments that Krishna gives to Arjuna. You don't have the qualification for non-performance of work, so don't even go there, because it's artificial. You have a nature and you engage according to your nature under the codes of Dharma. So, activity is not to be renounced. That's what this verse is saying. And so duty, that means not just activity, but prescribed duty, is not to be renounced. And charity and austerity, or sacrifice, dana and tapa, penance, not to be given up. You can't give them up. Well, you can't give up penance because just having a body, there's inconvenience and you have to deal with it. Not just, you live in New England and it snows in the winter. What are you going to do? But anywhere you are, there's something or something or something. You have to accept because that's the place. Tapa. And except for the purpose of purification. That's the message. Pavanani. Pavana is purified. One becomes purified by accepting those things. Properly applied, like charity given to a proper person. In the purport, charity in the mode of goodness is not to be avoided. It's to be done. And even if you're a transcendentalist, in a regulative way, it's done because it's good for you, and in the spontaneous manner, it's done because it's what one does in service to Krishna. And when you have something, you give that something. And as the opening sentence of the purport says, act for the advancement of human society. That's a big service, advancement of human society. So we're little people. If we do for advancing human society, we can do our little part. It's principle-based, principle-centered advancement with well-wishing towards others, a friendly disposition towards others. And we're not powerful. We're little people. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead may choose to use us as an instrument and do His will through us, even if it's, in a small way. So we live our lives in principle that way. And it's twice. Dana, tapa, and karma. Charity, penance or austerity, and activity. Activity in this case means prescribed activity, not just do something. It's prescribed activity. Even prescribed activity has bondage. It may elevate the bondage, but it's bondage. You get golden shackles instead of iron. But it's bondage. But because it's bondage, one is not to give it up. Because it's bondage, one is to perform in a prescribed manner for purification. Purification in this case means elevation in the modes of nature. So it's Krishna is not yet pointing to transcendence, he's pointing to mode of goodness, or as Prabhupada is saying in the purport, one who is in the lower stages of life. If one is in the lower if one is influenced by ignorance and passion, now I've got to act according to my psychophysical nature. Passion and ignorance. Those are covered in the upcoming verses. Renunciation of these three things improperly is in the mode of ignorance. And doing for some purpose is passion. And doing not for some purpose but for purification, mode of goodness. Even the Manishinam, the great souls, is purifying for them. The way that Prabhupada has presented this is the yogis should perform. The yogis means all the collective, those who are on the path of yoga. This yoga, that yoga, the other yoga, they're all yogis. The topmost is the bhakti yogi, but they're all yogis. It doesn't mean just the meditator yogi, it's all... It's the path of yoga is for purification. And then from that purification, transcendence. We shouldn't get confused. It's easy to get confused. But there are places that are recommending mode of goodness. And then when one is in transcendence, that's also touched on in Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna wondering, when I reach transcendence, then can I renounce? No. You teach others by example. Yadiracharati shreshtas. So even when you're at the perfectional stage, not specifically for purification, but for setting example, for the benefit of human society, by setting a good example. So if you need purification, you're already purified. Pavitra apavitra va. Let's read a few more verses. Text 6. All these activities should be performed without attachment to any expectation of result. Pala or palani. Chakva palani. They should be performed as a matter of duty. That is my final opinion. Again, prescribed duties should never be renounced. If one gives up his prescribed duties because of illusion, that's renunciation and ignorance. Such renunciation is said to be in the mode of ignorance. Anyone who gives up prescribed duties as troublesome or out of fear of bodily discomfort is said to have renounced in the mode of passion. Such action never leads to elevation of renunciation. mistaken renunciation. So we get our general principle in Rupa Goswami's teachings about renunciation. And in short, it's the Yukta Vairagya principle. Engaging with sense objects without attachment to sense enjoyment, Vishaya, but instead for the satisfaction of Krishna's senses. We have to be careful because in the preliminary stages, the early stages, we can easily, in our mind, thinking, I'm doing this for the pleasure of Krishna's senses, and in fact it's for the pleasure of her senses. And, at worst it's a mix, at best it's a mix, and at worst it's entanglement. We're deluding ourselves. So therefore better the Yukta Vairagya principle, cautiously executed, and combine that cautiously executed Yukta Vairagya with Bhagavad Dharma, the primary activities of hearing and chanting. A very interesting, long and profound purport in Brahma Samhita comes with the last section after the prayers, the Govindam prayers. There's a section where Lord Brahma doesn't ask, but Govinda, Krishna, anticipates his question or his doubt. And his doubt is similar to this topic, that is, if you do activity, then you become attached to the activity and attached to the fruits of the activity. And if you don't do the activity, so like in his case, Brahma is supposed to create a universe. Not like, go to school and get an A in your exam, or go to work and perform well in the workplace, or something, some smaller thing. He's got to build the universe. And he's thinking, gee, if I build the universe, I can get entangled and attached and think I'm the builder of a universe. But then if I don't do my service, then I'm neglecting my duties. So, looks like damned if I do and damned if I don't. So, what to do? And good question. It's a question we should be asking, not universe builders, but whatever our scope of activity is. How can I engage in the activity that I'm to be engaged in without getting attached to the activities and the results of the activities of what I'm engaged in? How to do that? So, there's several verses responding, but the essence is presented this way. When we join those worldly activities, the Sanskrit term is gona vritti, with hearing and chanting, then the gona vritti activities, the worldly looking parts of what we do, become as purifying as the hearing and chanting. Oh great, I can have one foot in one boat, the other foot in the other boat, and cross the ocean of material existence. That's not the message. It's both feet are in one boat, so we have to be clear what that boat is. It's not the material one, it's the spiritual one. So we're connecting the temporary with the eternal by an act of devotion, starting with hearing and chanting and remembering. Always remembering Krishna, carrying out prescribed duty. Exactly Bhagavad Gita's message, same as in Brahma Samhita. Yasmarat yudhyacha. Always remember me and engage in your prescribed duty of fighting. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna, and carry out your prescribed duties. In Arjuna's case, it's yudhya, it's fighting. It's such an important principle that is repeated multiple times in Bhagavad Gita. Just like the topic that you said you spoke about last week. Karma Yoga. It's not a small topic. And Karma Yoga doesn't stop there, doesn't, engage in your prescribed duty and be happy. It's engage in your prescribed duty and always think of Krishna. So how do you always think of Krishna? Hi Krishna. Welcome. To always think of someone requires being attached to that someone. And being attached to Krishna requires at least gradually becoming detached from all the things that we're attached to. Doesn't mean throw them away, trash them. It means relinquishing attachment to them. Anasaktasya vishayan. Without attachment to this is going to bring me enjoyment, sense enjoyment. My sense enjoyment is everything. Oh, and it happens to be something Krishna likes too. That's nice. But it's so we're not there. We're attached to the temporary. So therefore, here we are, chapter 18, the topic of renunciation and the proper understanding of renunciation, not giving something up. Karma, dana, and tapa. We're to engage in those three things for purification. As Manishinam, the elevated saintly persons become purified, further purified, to the point where it's no longer simply for purification, that's mode of goodness, motive. It becomes Shuddha Sattva. Shuddha Sattva means for Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. The attachment goes to Krishna, but the initial effort may be for purification. But purification for what sake? Often, chapter 2 Bhagavad Gita, persons that want purification, they want elevation to the heavenly planets. Not too much. Enough to get elevation to the heavenly planets and become an enjoyer in an upscale way. So how do we remove that desire for upscale enjoyment? You transfer that to Krishna. Krishna should be the upscale enjoyer. And there's no question about Krishna doesn't need anything from us. We need the purification to offer things to Krishna. And moving on that path, properly joined with hearing and chanting, which is Brahma Samhita's message, the primary activities of bhakti give a purifying potency to our worldly activities. And then they become as purifying as the hearing and chanting. We don't have to be fearful about the temporary and the entanglements of the temporary, although in normal consciousness it's something to concern yourself with, if not worry. Too much indulgence in activities of forgetfulness, it increases our bondage. That's not good. The proper understanding of karma is a big deal. Doing it is even a bigger deal. Living our lives in that manner, but it starts with these notional, proper conceptions and striving, calling for mercy from Krishna, for entering into that consciousness, original consciousness of the entity. Chapter 18, activity and renunciation of activity. Any discussion? Yes.
Maharaj, I had a question. So the difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, many people come up with this question, what is the difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga?
What would be your answer?
I would say if I act without being attached to the fruits, that is Karma Yoga, but if I act by attaching myself to Krishna, by renunciating those fruits to Krishna, that would be Bhakti Yoga.
Okay. I'll add to that. That's a nice answer. Did you get asked that question last week?
Yeah.
Okay. Generally speaking, at least in the earlier stages of Karma Yoga, the incentive is, I don't want the baggage. I don't want the bondage that goes with work. And I gotta work. Not just I have to earn a living for my family. We have to work. Guna, karma, and living entity combined. We're going to do something. We can't stop working even for... So, if I do something, then there's bondage. So how do I get free from the bondage? Karma Yoga offers the... I want something good. I want for me. Commonly, at least in the preliminary stages. It's not about sacrifice to Vishnu, it's about I don't want bondage. And it can, elevate in stages of consciousness, but bhakti is not with that notion. Bhakti, liberation is included already within bhakti, so that's a big distinction between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. So it's not like a bucket over here and there's a bucket over there and you're either in this one or that one. It's describing the nature of, so like karma, mishra, bhakti. I'm doing bhakti, but I've got my stuff going on, my wish list of what I want. By Krishna, doing things for Krishna and offering results. Another distinction is, in the case of bhakti, it's not just offering the results. It's offering everything. Offering myself, body, mind, and words. And a subset is the results belong to Krishna. So before I even start my activity, which I'm intending to offer the results to Krishna, or at least some portion of the results to Krishna, bhakti, that's already there. My life is to please Krishna. And so I do activity, and that's to please Krishna too. And it's his. It may be at an immature stage, but at least conceptually. So, are we practicing, let's ask it the same question in a different way. Are we practicing Bhakti Yoga or Karma Yoga? Because we're not there yet. We're not the pure Bhakti platform. So are we doing Karma Yoga trying to get to Bhakti Yoga? Or are we doing Bhakti Yoga? It's Karma Mishra Bhakti. And the Bhakti part is, at least in the mind, and preferably deeper in the heart level, my existence is to serve Krishna. I'm entangled in the temporary. I'm attracted and I want to be the enjoyer of it. And that's the obstacle. So let me cultivate bhakti by at least the fruits of my work I offer to Krishna. So it's a subset of the bhakti cultivation. And even preliminary to that one is I'm not this body. And then if I'm not this body, then what is produced from the body is not mine, it belongs to Krishna. It's offered to Krishna. It's, it's cultivation. But it's a philosophical cultivation that becomes a matter of behind our activity, what's the consciousness? We'll say the same thing in a different way. You find this in the final purport of chapter 6, the Yoga Ladder description. If somebody's at this stage, they can be called the Karma Yogi if. And then a little elevation. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says something quite similar, where one can be identified in a position provided that person is not, they're stuck, they're not progressively moving, they're identifying with and staying in that position, then the nomenclature is appropriate. Because otherwise the nomenclature that's appropriate is Uttam Bhakti. I'm cultivated. I accept the teaching of Romapada Swami. I not just give my lip service, but in my heart of hearts, I accept Romapada Swami's teachings are Uttam Bhakti, and I'm practicing or cultivating that. Even my consciousness may not be there, but my attempt is to come to that position. It's a slippery slope. It's easy to say those things and mean those things, and then by complacency Ramananda, you have something? No. Anyone? Yes.
Maharaj, in 18.5, you talked about the charity should be performed for suitable persons. How do you define a suitable person?
It's in Bhagavad Gita. But in principle, really simple, a Brahmana or Vaishnava. Because we know how a Brahmana and a Vaishnava will use that charity. They'll use it in service to Vishnu. Suitable recipient. Now, what about the Brahmana or the Vaishnava that receives that charity? They do devotional service to Vishnu with it. That's what they do. And it can be worship of a deity, or it can be different things. Now what about us? We're aspiring Vaishnavas, so we just give charity to ourselves. I'm very charitable. But it's the intention is purification. The will of a Vaishnava is to benefit the soul. The will of a Vaishnava is to remind others of Krishna. So that Vaishnava will do this or that or the other thing that has at the core to remind another of Vishnu or Krishna. And it may look like this or that or the other thing, but it's to remind, the intention is explicit, to remind them of Krishna. So there's certain acts of charity that you can't go wrong. Make a donation to the BBT for the printing of Prabhupada's books. Gita Jayanti, or a donation so that goes to the college preachers so they can give books to the students and allow the students to make a contribution because it's purifying for them to do so, but otherwise, etc. So it may not just be deity worship. That's another safe area. But the consciousness of the pujari could be, hey, this is good maintenance. So where the worshipper, suitable recipient is where the worshipper is very dedicated to the deity. There's a nice example of this. When Indra had offended Brihaspati and he left, Indra was in a big problem because the Daityas knew the strength of the Devas was gone. So Shukracharya whispered in their ear, now is your chance, you can take over the kingdom of God. You can take over, the king of heaven. So they took over the kingdom of heaven. And Indra was in a fix. What to do? Went to Brahma, Brahma said, Vishwarup. So they went to Vishwarup. Till you'll be our stand-in. Well, until Brihaspati comes back. So he was reluctant. And he gave 3 reasons. One of them is, if I engage in rituals, the purohit, then it's the duty of the person who is engaging the purohit to give donation, to give dakshin. And then I can just become an enjoyer of and anticipating, meditating upon getting the enjoyment facilities from the King of Heaven, giving charity to the priest of the heavenly residence. But he gave a solution, as Prabhupada explains, that he would, whatever he received, he would just use for the worship of his deity. And he wouldn't become tainted. Then he'd make opulent offerings to his deity. Fantastic. Without attachment. Receive without attachment. Receive in charity. So, that's a qualified recipient. So you can read in Bhagavad Gita, charity in the modes of nature. And the mode of goodness is the fit recipient it describes. Another nice, similar example is on the good side. Jayadev, author of Gita Govinda, he was a worshipper of a deity. The deity's name was, I forget. The deity's name was, I forget. Notes. And he wanted to have a nice festival for his deity. So he decided, with his wife's permission, you continue to worship the deity. I'm going to go on a tour, recite Gita Govinda, and whatever I receive is going to be used for the festival for the deity. So he's a fit recipient. It's not like I'm going to live comfortably. I'm going to go write Gita Govinda and go around and, live comfortably. Anything else?
There seems to be a very thin, delicate line between the urge to do something based on psychophysical nature
Yeah.
on the one hand, and then self-control on the other.
Yeah. It's thin,
What are some
sometimes it's thick.
How do you distinguish that it's appropriate, but it's coming from the psychophysical nature versus I need to control it? Because if one were to control that urge, sometimes you end up regretting later that I didn't act according to my nature, and I was not authentic, it was artificial. And then there are setbacks and fall downs, and then you're back to square one.
Well, there's
So,
setbacks and fall downs if you do it the other way also.
Yeah.
The knife cuts both sides. Damned if you do and damned if you don't. So, therefore, the thin line you said, or fine line, is discerned by caution, and you proceed with caution, whether you check the urge or you engage the urge. And the caution valve is Krishna should be pleased. Now, it's easy to be self-deluded and think, well, Krishna be pleased. So it's not, you don't get escaped just by, wishing thoughtfully to be Krishna should be pleased. Because it's real easy, or say it stronger. Our tendency is to be self-deluded. Just kind of given. We see with filters, and we think we're right. Therefore we need guidance. Now then comes the next question. Supposing the person that's giving guidance is less than perfect. I know somebody that's stuck because, I gotta take shelter of somebody that's perfect. And otherwise, I can't take shelter of anybody. Prabhupada said, one must take shelter of Uttama Adhikari, Guru. And how do I know who's an Uttama Adhikari Guru anyway? I don't have the qualification to discern. It takes one to know one, and I'm not. So how do I know? By Guru Sadhu. So, course correction is needed as one moves along, and so the self-honesty factor. You can kick yourself that I could have, should have, and you can kick yourself that I did and I messed up. Cuts both ways. So be cautious as you move on the path of bhakti under proper guidance. Become knowledgeable in Guru Sadhu Shastra. Become, Chaito Darpana Marjanam. Not only from chanting, but from hearing. Shrimpata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridyan Taksto Yabat. So I just follow that. And I know that I'm less than perfect, and in my less than perfect condition, I'm going to make some mistakes. And for my mistakes, there's going to be some pain or some difficulty. I accept that. But I do want to move on the path of purification. So continual course correction and refinement. So the focus is Guru Sadhu Shastra. And just keep going. You have to continue in the Sadhu Sangha principle and continue in the self-evaluation course correction principle, the introspection and the hearing. And trust in Krishna, He's going to help me. And I will make mistakes. That's every endeavor is covered with some type of fault. Doesn't mean we don't endeavor. And the endeavor can be that go back to your question. On this side, act according to, or not act according to. We should be cautious. Prabhupada's phrase, even on the royal road, there's accidents.
Right.
But accident doesn't mean don't go on the royal road. And it's not always that I refrain from the urge instead of acting according to the urge. There can be multiple other factors. I didn't apply myself in the proper manner or mood in the other option. And, you know, so there's many things. It's not just one thing.
Do the same principles and guidelines apply for, say, kids in that I'm guiding or helping them grow? So the same guidelines apply for them as well.
Sure. And so you're not a perfect being, and you're giving guidelines.
Right.
And they're hearing from you because you care about them. But you're clear. You should be clear, at least within yourself. I'm not perfect. You can be clear with them. I'm not perfect. So that you don't. If something gets messed up along the way, the intention was to transparently transmit the message that I've understood from Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, and living life. And so you're saying, continue with the course correction compass inside. When you're lazy, you don't do that. So it takes being alert. Same word is used here, manishinam. To be a devotee, you have to be thoughtful. And if you're not thoughtful, it's not going to be too likely to be successful being a devotee. So same thing giving guidance to young people. Or whoever. Old people.
May I build on that with a follow-up? So just building on the guidance given to children, so definitely they go through stages as they grow. So do you, it seems like in certain stages you may have to be more forceful, and certain others you have to hold back.
But whether the more forceful or hold back, the place that either, or and then in between, etc., is from a place of love. And that's the harder part, or the more refined part. And even, the same individual at different times, it's more this and then another time less this, more that.
Right.
You have to be tuned in to the individual, whatever the stage. Not just children, whatever the stage. Anyone else? Yes.
So, regarding this whole karma yoga topic
Yes.
and doing the prescribed duties.
Yeah.
So this is a time and age, like something that I observed, like few decades back, people just perform their duties for the duty's sake, like whether they like the job or not like the job, they do it because they don't necessarily per se focus on if they love doing that particular prescribed duty. There was like a duty platform, but now like more youth and even like adults, they want to take up jobs or even courses in college which they really love to do. They have to find that connection, and definitely the stability of job or their career is questioned because they keep jumping because they're figuring out what they love to do in their life. So how do we see that, because that's where this whole current youth and this whole thing is going right now, like doing work that you love to do, not because somebody else wants you to do, or so bringing it back to Krishna consciousness, and where we have there's like spectrum of situations. One where people just love their job and they are happy because it's very favorable to Krishna consciousness. And there's other end where they just bite their teeth and they're just there because you provide some needs, and you just get away from work and get back to your Krishna consciousness at the end of the day or the beginning of the day. And at the larger chunk of the day, you're just there in a very unsatisfactory mental state. I just want to bring that up and see your thoughts on
Okay, well, there's other versions besides those two polar opposites. I'll share one of them. It's part of the narcissism presentation that I've made at colleges. There's this person, Simon Sinek. You heard his name?
Mm-hmm.
You've heard his name. Speaking about millennials, young, and the instant gratification generation. And he gives examples, this and that and the other thing. And it says, but there's something that just you can't get instantly, and that's job satisfaction or meaningful relationships. It's time and it's work, and he says, I interact with lots of millennials. They didn't use that, but and the range is quite different. The bottom is drug overdose or suicide or chronic depression, and using his language, the best case scenario is apathy. How do you like your job? It's okay. And I was thinking, I'm not making an impact, so I'm gonna quit my job. And he said, but how long have you been working? 8 months. The young people today, the impact notion, social activism, making a difference thing, it's a climb in his language. So, he, in his role, tries to encourage them to make the climb, whatever that is for their psychophysical nature. So there's other options and other options at play, but it's the presentation is part of the narcissism message because it's all about me. And so the two options is I'm satisfied or I'm not satisfied. And there's not really a lot of satisfaction. There are persons that are really satisfied with what they're doing. But in many cases, the reality and the expectation don't match. We talked about that last night. Great expectations. Yoga of great expectations. And Charles Dickens and other, great expectations. And it doesn't match. And then depression. And changing a career, I've seen people try to do that. Their lives get turned upside down. Their career establishment at a young stage, and once you've gone a certain distance, it's not easy to change it. So you need to know what your psychophysical nature is and connect with what that is. And it may not give the job satisfaction that you're looking for, but anyway, it's not easy. Especially in, the artificial way that people live their lives and the artificial expectations that people have of, monetary, socio-economic status, and then something crashes and the whole thing is gone. So it's not easy. So back to your question, if someone's going to transition from something they don't like to something they like, they better be young. Because making a transition at a later stage ain't easy. It has, if anything, incrementally. And if there's some things that are just crossing the line of, I realize this is unethical, then you have to exit more quickly than slowly. Some people, like, animal testing and
So, again, it's not whole narcissism, right? Like, because I like this one, so that's why I'm choosing to do this. So that's like self-love. They say, does that have a place in Krishna consciousness?
yes,
Because,
of course. Of course. And that gets offered to Krishna. That's a gift from Krishna, and I'm offering it to Krishna. I mean, you have yours. And that's fine. Offer it to Krishna. Be happy.
So there's a place.
There's a
it's
place
not
for it.
narcissist, but
There's a place for it.
it need not be always.
I like what I'm doing. And there's some things I do that I don't like. but I'm doing because I know it's purifying. And, including tolerating. Amanina manadena. Because this is Lord Chaitanya's instruction. And sometimes it ain't easy.
Because there's always this fine line of guilt that comes when you really enjoy what you do, and
No.
you're like, no, that's like, So
We're not impersonalists. We want to be cautious, back to your husband's question. Be careful. Don't get into the enjoying mood, because it's real easy to fall in the soup again. And then Krishna's forgotten, I'm forgotten, it's about my happiness. Whoops.
that place sounds wonderful. Like you love what you do, but at the same time you're not attached to
Yeah.
it. You're enjoying
Yeah.
the activity. Like
That's bhakti. It's a fine line, that's for sure. To live your life in bhakti, it takes some refinement. And we have to continual course correction. And if we're not doing the continual course correction, we don't have our compass out and am I headed for the right target? A little bit, and soon, a little bit later, you're more than a little bit off. And then, whoops, and it's embarrassing. I mean, self-embarrassing, but also in our social context, embarrassing. Yes.
How do you love without attachment?
How do you love without attachment? Well, first and foremost is Krishna has to be there. Because otherwise it's not love. It's about me, myself, and I, the narcissism thing. And it has something to do with the verses we just read, which is your question. That is, saying who's at the center. So love is something that we want, naturally so, because it's of the soul. And let's put it this way, like Queen Kunti. How can parents be parents without attachment to their children? You can't. You can't be a loving parent if you're not attached to your children. But not inordinate. So that's parents and children. So then husband and wife, or friend and friend. So how do you be attached to a friend? Because you have a nice friend. Attached to your friend. Have a loving friendship with your friend without attachment. Some attachment, but not to the point where forgetfulness of Krishna is the enjoyer of that relationship. That's the parameter. You won't get that without cultivating bhakti. You'll feel happiness in the friendship and attachment to the object. Guess what? Time takes everything away. It's a recipe for frustration and unhappiness. So it's not like, hey, don't get attached, because you're going to be a loser. Don't have love because the object of love is going to disappear and then you're going to be sad. So the appropriate, so what's appropriate? The appropriate, anasaktasya vishayan yatarham upayunjita, very important verse from Rupa Goswami, according to suitability. And what's suitable for you may not be suitable for your brother. And what's suitable for you and your brother may be not suitable for someone else. So we're all unique. And so suitability has a lot to do with you, or the one who wants to love and be loved, connecting that natural inclination with Krishna should be pleased. In this relationship with your dear friend who you are attached to, and I think it's good that you're attached to one another. Good. Don't forget Krishna. And then it's not, there's attachment, but not an inordinate attachment. This is like the topic last night, which we missed you being there. But Great Expectations, you know the story? You've heard of the novel? The author is Charles Dickens. So it's a early and mid 1800 century story, not century, 1800s, about a young fellow that had, he wanted a girl, and he wanted the wealth to impress the girl because the girl wanted money to be impressed by a young boy. So we went on this Great Expectations thing, and it all crashed. And then the end of the story is he got together with a girl, and they were lived happily ever after. But a very complex British type of story, like Harry Potter, very complicated, British, complicated. I haven't read it, but complicated. So material expectations lead to disappointment because it doesn't match reality. So what's reality in the love, and in the exchange of love for one and another, friend and friend, or whatever. Inappropriate, but not to the point where Krishna is forgotten. We do the Krishna forgetting part all the time because we want to love, and we have a bottom conception. Love generally means attachment, but inordinate attachment. So we have to leverage that with bhakti. That cultivation takes thoughtfulness, deliberate inward cultivation. You think of other names of other people that you feel some attachment for, and attachment isn't bad. Expectation isn't bad. It's the false expectations that causes suffering. Have spiritual expectations. Have spiritual attachment. Put Krishna at the center. It's easy to say, and it's another thing to do, but that's how you avoid it, or how you overcome it. The material entanglement is overcome by bhakti. We're not supposed to become stones. No feelings. No attachment. No expectations. Nirvana. Cultivation. Bhakti cultivation. Anything else? Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai. Maharaj ki Jai.